Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the NextUp Town Hall. My name is Jeremy Goldberg. I'm the president and quarterback at LeagueApps. It's my pleasure to be our host for today's conversation, which I'm incredibly excited about. We have over 500 organizations from across the United States, for that matter, North America, that are signed up for today's discussion. And there's actually thousands more that are going to wish that they signed up once they learn about what we're going to talk about. And as we talked about over the past few weeks, as we're in this crazy situation where we're social distancing, this is such an important opportunity to remind ourselves about the opportunities to come together and remind ourselves what we're missing, right? Which is sport and its community. And I think as we appreciate that, I think we could take advantage of these kinds of opportunities to be together, to learn together, and to better ourselves. This is undoubtedly, as I've said the past couple of weeks, an incredibly difficult time. I know the kinds of challenges and questions that we face as an organization. I certainly know that's true of everyone that's running youth and local sports organizations. I think they announced today that 6.6 million people filed for unemployment this week. The previous high before this crisis was 682,000 in a period. So this is an unprecedented time, and there's a lot of challenges that people have. I've seen this firsthand. There was a gentleman in Detroit that I met through the sports world that passed away as one of the first victims there. 43 years old, 2 young kids, was an incredible guy. And so this is real, and we appreciate the situation that each one of you are in. And at the same time, we recognize that as leaders, your organizations and your communities, you've got to respond to this. And we're going to get through this together as we work together to help make sure people understand the important role that sports has and to better our organizations and our industry as well. I was remember reading, I think it was a post yesterday that Michael Lombardi wrote about Winston Churchill, right? And you talk about crisis, right? And you think about that period, there's examples of what leadership in crisis can do to bring people together to create hope. In a football analogy, you lose a great quarterback or a running back and you got to go into that playoff game. You still got to figure out how to win, right? You still got to figure out how to survive. Shane Battier, we were texting this past week, and he described the feeling of how are you going to respond to this kind of adversity? And he described the moment of seeing the rope come out in Game 6 as he's on the court, as everyone thinks that they're going to lose the game. How do you respond to that kind of adversity? And what we firmly believe, I think all of us, is that youth and local sports is going to bounce back first, right? People know what they're missing. They need that kind of activity. Not to mention the fact that at any moment, if you're cooped up with your kids, you're ready to sign them up and get them out under someone else's purview. So there are lots of opportunities for us to respond to this adversity, and that's really what today's conversation is about. I've been mentioning that I've been reading this great book about Muhammad Ali. Unfortunately, I haven't gotten as far as I wanted to it with 2 young kids running around and all the work that's going on. But as I quoted him the past few weeks, and the inspiration I've drawn from his language, thank God he's got so many powerful quotes. There's one that I think is particularly apt for this moment where we're being told the next 4 weeks, the next 6 weeks, we're really locked down. And that quote is, don't count the days, make the days count. Don't count the days, make the days count. By being here today, by doing what you can do, you're making these days count. And I promise you, there's going to be a better opportunity on the other side of it. The last thing I'll say is that I've not had a chance to get a haircut, so I'm not trying to channel my inner Don King. But I suspect that as these sessions go on for the next few weeks, I might start to scare folks. But I will say that, again, as great champions too, as Muhammad Ali does, you get back up off the mat, you respond to that kind of adversity, and you figure out how to be a champion. This is the first this is one in a series of events that we're doing. Next week, we're going to focus on opportunities around digital innovation, whether it's esports and how we learn from them, whether it's how we're using technology to run our organizations. And that's really what this NextUp community is about. How do we create a community for this industry around youth and local sports, providing you guys with the support and the professional development and the leadership that you need to make the best kinds of experiences in your communities and to really impact youth and kids and adults all the same. And there's lots of ways that you can do that, both by being here today, by joining our Slack group. And if you don't know what a Slack group is, it means you're slacking. Like, this is an opportunity to improve yourself, learn how Slack works. It's a free tool to connect with people in this industry. There's a survey that we're using to get people to kind of give us feedback about other content that you need. Jamie will post that link in the chat tool for the GoToWebinar that you can fill out. We're going to give a $100 gift card to Amazon for somebody that's filled out that survey by this time next week. And then you can check out the more events that we have on LeagueApps.com. So lots of good stuff, and I'm really excited to get right into the conversation because we've got an incredible panel that is going to share unique perspectives. And here's how today's going to work. I'm going to spend, and invite Shane Battier to give us about 7 minutes to 10 minutes of his perspective on leadership and his experience as a 2-time NBA champion, who's currently the vice president of basketball development and analytics for the Heat. And he needs no introduction. He's the winningest college basketball player of all time. He'll share his perspective. Then I'm going to invite Michael Lombardi to speak. Now, I wrote on my LinkedIn and on the LeagueApps blog yesterday that I'm a Michael Lombardi devotee, and I suspect that there are lots of them based on the comments I'm getting back. Because what I love about what Michael does is, I'm a huge football fan. He's unfortunately explained why the Dallas Cowboys haven't won in decades, and as much as it pains me, I have to agree with his analysis. But when you want to think about leadership, you can read a dry business book, but it's hard to take those lessons. And so if you have the ability to take something you love like sports, and you can understand the why teams win, why championship organizations operate, why Bill Belichick or Bill Walsh do what they do, that's so valuable to distill those lessons and bring them into your organization, into your business, into your nonprofit. So that's the gift that Michael Lombardi offers. He wrote an amazing book called The Gridiron Genius. He's got a great daily newsletter called The Daily Coach. Also has a podcast called The GM Shuffle. There's a great podcast that was out yesterday that I was listening to this morning that will cover some of the topics around leadership today. So we're really thrilled for him to offer his observations. Then we're going to give the chance to have leadership in action shown to you. And we're going to have Logan and Michele, or as we call her, DJ, speak about what they're doing with their organization. And then we're going to open up to questions. I'm going to ask them, and I know you guys are going to ask them as well. So check out the chat panel on the right-hand side and go to webinar, type those questions in, and we will make sure they get answered. And if we don't get them answered today, we'll follow up with the panelists and make sure we get those answers to you through our Slack and email community. So that's what we got going, and I'm going to start by turning it over to Shane Battier. He's got that palm tree look going, so I decided to bring out a little tree as well, making us if you're going to shelter at home, it feels like Miami is probably a good place to do that. No judgment about the Jersey Shore where I am right now. But Shane, you're a champion. This is adversity. What's the advice? What's the perspective? How do you think about leadership in a moment like this, and the advice you could give for all the youth sports and community leaders and local sports organizations out there?
Well, first of all, thank you, Jeremy, for inviting me to be a part of this esteemed panel right here. You're doing amazing work with LeagueApps. I've been with LeagueApps since the very beginning, and you're doing amazing work, and you're going to be in the front lines of LeagueApps. Times of normalcy again when COVID is. So thank you to Brian and everyone at LeagueApps for putting together this initiative that's long overdue. So you're probably asking, like, what does Battier know about leading during crisis? And the truth, I've never been part of a crisis like this, as most of you have not either. But I go to probably the greatest coach in basketball, if not all sports, Coach K. And he said, you know what, when in doubt, copy the people who did it the best. And so that's what I did. And I'm sure Michael will talk about one of the hero of mine, Winston Churchill, and his leadership during 56 straight days of bombing of England and how he kept that country together. But I'd like to talk about another hero of mine, Abraham Lincoln. And our country had not faced a crisis like this, like the Civil War, ever. And instead of strength and power and the traditional ways of leadership, Lincoln led with kindness, sensitivity, and compassion, honesty, empathy. Those are his weapons of choice, which were the right weapons to lead our country through our bloodiest conflict. And Coach K was an amazing teacher, and obviously I spent 4 amazing years around him at Duke University, and we won a lot of games together. And I wouldn't be here today without the lessons that I learned from him. Probably the greatest leader that I learned from. And although we didn't have a crisis of this magnitude, the one thing Coach K taught me that I was super proud of in my entire college and pro career is that when times were the hairiest, I was always calmest. And that was the one thing Coach K always talked about. He said, look, if you'll watch the tape, when stress is the highest, you'll always see me the calmest. And it's true. Coach K is a madman. He's an absolute madman, yelling at the referees, the fans, the players. But if you look at him when the game is tight, when there's a stressful situation, he's always the calmest. And it's amazing how your team feeds off that. Because obviously in times of crisis like we have now, we're looking for strength. We're looking for a calming influence to help guide our ship through these choppy waters right now. And it takes me to my senior year at Duke, and people remember our team in 2001, one of the great teams in the modern era, national champions. But what people forget is I lost on my senior night to University of Maryland, who was excellent team. And Carlos Boozer, our center, broke his foot. And after the game, there was a real possibility that we could have lost our last game at Carolina, lost in the A championship, and got upset in the first round because of the uncertainty, because of the chaos of one of our best players being hurt. We didn't know. And we felt sorry for ourselves. And there was a lot of head hanging and doubt that was circling our locker room. So coach called us to practice at 8 a.m. the next morning. And after about 20 minutes of just lackluster practice, he kicked us out of practice. Say, you know what? When you're ready to work and believe and win, come back. And so we had the ubiquitous team meeting in the locker room, and there were some chairs owned by me and Nate James, the senior captains, and we came out and said, we are ready to work. And he sat us down in a very calm, measured way. He said, gentlemen, if you believe my plan, we will be national champions. Now, most of the media, most of the fans, they're writing us off. They say, no, Duke is done, no Boozer, no chance. We're too small. They're going to start Reggie Love, who is, has more faith in Obama's body man, as our starting center against Brendan Haywood against North Carolina in our next game. But coach, if you believe in my plan and just do as I ask, we will be national champions. And to a man, went down the line, looked everybody in the eye. The rule at Duke that we looked each other in the eye. We always treated each other with respect and told the truth. And we said, yes, coach, we believe. And Coach K unleashed his plan of, you know what, we're going to try to shoot 50 threes. This is something no one's expecting. And if you miss, shoot again. We cannot fail. And miss is not a fail. We just go again, shoot again. And an amazing thing happened. We developed an amazing sense of confidence and a belief that we had a plan that was going to defeat our biggest piece of adversity that we'd ever face. And we went to North Carolina, beat them by double digits, went into the ACC tournament, won that in a close game against Maryland. We get Carlos Boozer back in the tournament. We cut down the nets in 2001 in Minneapolis. And all people remember is the glory times. They don't remember the tough times, the moments of doubt and uncertainty like we're facing now. So my advice to all the leaders here, channel your inner Coach K, huddle your people, look them in the eye, that everything is going to be okay. We will get through this, but you have to believe. And it's okay to be scared. It's okay to be scared, but don't let that scare paralyze you. And in the end, like Winston Churchill, like Abraham Lincoln, like Coach K, the reward at the end of this is worth the sacrifice and the pain that we're going through right now. And so those are the lessons and the stories that come to mind in these uncertain days that we're facing.
Well, Shane, thank you for that. And the only thing I'll say is I feel like Reggie Love shouldn't be the only person that got into politics from that team based on the chills I just got as you were talking. So I'm just saying we might be in the market for some new political leaders after all this. So we'll come back to that another day. I'm excited to bring Michael Lombardi into this conversation. And I remember discovering him as, I think it was a regular guest on the Bill Simmons podcast way back when, and have kind of followed everything he's written since and have gotten my team involved with this. One of the cool experiences I had is during Hard Knocks, which is that great HBO show. They go behind the scenes, and I was watching the year with behind the scenes with the Cleveland Browns. My family's originally from Cleveland, been wondering when they're ever going to win again. And one of the guilty pleasures I had was watching that show, then listening to Lombardi's podcast the day later to break down the episode and comparing my interpretation of their leadership with his. And in real time, I would speak to the team at our all hands, describing like what had happened on the episode, what was going wrong about the leadership, and I would bring in kind of some of Lombardi's analysis. And sure enough, the analysis about what would happen was clearly true. Hugh Jackson didn't even make it through the year, and the Browns had quite some challenges. But it was a real-time diagnosis of leadership and culture that resonated with me, and I was able to tell my wife that I was working when I was watching HBO Real Sports. Which, if you can make it work, go for it, right? Michael, I'll turn it over to you. And how do you want to distill when you think about leadership in crisis and the key ways to think about that?
Well, thank you, Jeremy. I appreciate it. Shane, thank you for your wonderful talk. I'm excited to be here. I think, when I think of someone saying leading in crisis, I think of Billy Joel. Billy Joel, the musical entertainer from Long Island. He wrote a song, "We Didn't Start the Fire." And the whole idea of his song was he wanted to write down everything that happened in his life from the time he was born until the day he wrote the song. And every decade was crisis. There was always something going on. And if you just listen to the words of that song, there was crisis. And we live in a world of crisis. Now, no crisis is more dramatic than what we face today. This is worldwide crisis. We actually, for the first time in our world history, we have scientists cooperating with one another to find a cure. Usually they try to keep that secret so they can benefit only themselves. That's no longer the case. So when you lead in crisis, as Churchill had to do, and they asked Winston Churchill, why did everyone ignore you all through the 30s? And why wasn't it until you were in the Channel ports, the Germans were in the Channel ports, that we named you the prime minister? And he said, because fear does the work of reason. Fear does the work of reason, and we are fearful now. And now is a wonderful time to reason with people and express really what you want to do as a leader. And I think of Churchill's incredible leadership. I think his powerful words, his messaging, but I also think that he displayed the 5 principles that I think every great leader does during crisis. But every great leader does this all the time. First thing he has to have is common sense, right? Too often we find leaders without common sense. Their ego gets in the way of decision making, and they lose touch with reality. And I think in this crisis, common sense sometimes can get lost because we have so many people affected. And then I think the second most important area of leadership at any time is create stability. The leader's words have to create stability. You've got to give reassurance to the people that we're going to get through this. We have the will to win. We will never surrender. We will always fight till the bitter end. And I think stability is created through words, through actions. And we talk about his communication skills, which were powerful, and his words, which he chose every single one for the precise time, was absolutely important to him. The third area is believe in the people. You've got to believe in people that are assigned to do their jobs, right? And this is really what I have the hardest time with. And I think if I was in a leadership position today, I would tell a lot of people to shut up. We have too many people speaking that don't know anything about this disease. We have too many people that are giving opinions that don't really know what their opinions are. And I think that you've got to believe in the people that are qualified to make these decisions and trust them. There's too many people that have opinions that you can't listen to. And as a leader, you've got to drown them out because people want to hear what they have to do. They don't want to hear what they think they should do. They want to hear what they need to do. So you've got to believe in people. The other thing you have to constantly work on every single day, and I'm sure Coach K did this at Duke more than anyone, is preserve the pride of the organization, right? There's great pride in America. There's great pride in our flag. There's great pride in our unification, how we came together in 2001 after 9/11. There's great pride. And when we're faced adversity, we have that pride. We got to talk about that pride every single day as a leader. And then finally, the leader's got to care more than anybody. When I see pictures of Andrew Cuomo and I see pictures of the head research, they haven't slept in weeks. You can see how much it cares. You've got to care more than anybody. You've got to care the most. I think those 5 principles really, in leading in most all times, demonstrates the most effective way you can communicate your message with integrity, accountability, and really empathy towards those. So for me, as I sit in this chair and I write the Daily Coach every day, I think those are the themes that we have to do in our leadership role.
Michael, follow up with one question before I then turn it over and we'll kind of profile Logan and Michele. One thing that Shane said that I think you've written about was, and all of a sudden Coach K said, hey, we have boozers down, we need a different strategy. We're going to do 53 pointers. It's not the obvious. No one thought that made sense. I mean, maybe now it seems a little bit more obvious, but then it wasn't obvious. It wasn't the obvious decision to do that. That wasn't what was happening in college basketball. And later on, I'll ask Shane to talk about how he's used data in a way that's not obvious. And you talked about one of the aspects of great leaders, when I asked you what Belichick would do if he was running a youth sports organization right now, would be to focus on the non-obvious. What does that mean, and why is that important to leadership, especially at a time like now?
Well, so oftentimes we always want to focus on what's the easiest, the path of least resistance. I tell a story about Lucille Ball and I Love Lucy all the time to illustrate this, right? Lucy is in her, and some of the people listening to this webinar are too young to remember, but I Love Lucy was a popular sitcom all through the 50s. And Lucy, in one episode, she's in her bedroom, and it was a typical apartment house in New York City, bedroom, living room, kitchen, that was it. In her bedroom, her wedding ring falls off her finger. She crawls on the ground. She can't find it. So she's crawling around forever. She can't seem to find it. The next scene comes in. We see her in the living room crawling on the floor. Her husband, Ricky, walks in the door. And when he walks in the door, he asks her, "What are you doing?" She says, "I'm looking for my wedding ring." And he says to her, "Well, where did you lose it?" She said, "Well, I lost it in the bedroom." And then naturally, Ricky's shocked and surprised. He said, "Well, why are you looking in the living room?" She said, "Well, the light's much better here." And I think that's what happens oftentimes. It becomes easy for us to look for things when the light's the best. The non-obvious is hard to find. You watch any Sherlock Holmes episode, Arthur Conan Doyle created this character after Jacob Bell, a professor in Scotland. And he basically always looks for the non-obvious. What is the reasons why? You know, in one of the episodes, there's a dog that's there all the time that was around when these murders were committed. No one thought the dog was important, but yet the dog would always attack somebody he didn't know. And on the night of the murder, the dog didn't attack anybody. Clearly, the non-obvious was the dog knew the person who committed the murder. And I think that's how you have to approach everything that you look at in life is what is the non-obvious? Belichick, call timeout with 24 seconds left to go in Super Bowl 49. That's obvious. But what wasn't obvious was the Seattle sideline was disorganized. And he saw that. So if he called timeout at that point, he would have given the advantage to Seattle, not to himself. We have to look at every problem through the non-obvious.
Yeah, it's a great lesson. One thing I think about how at LeagueApps, how we thought about responding to this is, you know, when your revenues go off a cliff, because what we try to do in our business is we only make money when our customers are making money. And that's great in good times, but in bad times, we're going through this together. So the obvious thing would be to do is to focus on how do we get as much revenue as quickly as possible to solve that. The non-obvious thing was say, don't focus on revenue, focus on relationships, focus on helping people, because at some point that will work out. But if we double down on that, that's going to be better for our business. And that to us has worked out really well because we're able to build authentic relationships and not worrying about the revenue, believing that if we do the right things as an organization, good things will happen. Where I think organizations that are focusing just what's in front of their face and responding to that without thinking about what are the strategies that may be different, may be missing opportunities. So excited to get back to conversations with Michael and Shane, kind of bring this conversation full circle. But one of the things as we think about youth in local sports is how leadership is in action every day. And I've been super impressed by what Logan, you've been doing with Pro Skills and DJ, what you've been doing with Ultimate Lacrosse. So wanted to give you each a couple minutes just to speak a little bit about, you know, Logan, in the case of Pro Skills, which is this great basketball program that's headquartered out of Charlotte, and certainly know that you have your share of stories. You may have been on the losing side of some of those games at Duke when you played at Davidson. No hard feelings there. But you have this experience now leading this organization that was flying high. You just signed this deal with Steph Curry and running his teams, and now all of a sudden you're responding to what's going on. So I think you described at one point this crisis as like being at war, and that requires a mindset shift. So what is the shift that you've had to make as a leader, and how have you responded? What advice would you give to others about how you've responded?
Yeah, well, thanks, Jeremy. I appreciate you guys having me on, and I think, you know, thanks to Michael and Shane for their inspiring words. And a lot of what they said kind of applies to what we've gone through. And I think it's important to realize that this came on really fast. And, you know, 2 weeks ago we were talking about making investments and doing this and looking at what our year was going to look like, and to have that all sort of come crashing down in the matter of, you know, 5 to 10 days was a little bit traumatic. So I think it's important that people sort of realize like this came on really quickly, and to sort of like take a break and allow people to sort of be vulnerable and recognize the situation we're in, I think was an important first step. And we, you know, once the NBA kind of called things off, we sort of sat down as an entire team, and we've always put a big focus on, we want to be open and communicate clearly and make decisions. You know, ultimately the decisions are made by myself and my business partner, but we also want to allow people to have a say in what we're going to do and what they're thinking and how they're feeling. So we really kind of huddled together and talked about what we were thinking about doing and allow people to have their say. And so, you know, we sort of moved on from the trauma of everything, and it sort of found our footing. And the main things that we're trying to focus on are really just saying, we want to communicate with our staff, with our coaches, and with our parents and with our players. And we've tried to be as open and honest as possible, and Jeremy, just like you said, we're just focusing on those relationships, and our initial focus, kind of came back to our company values, and we want to do what's right, and for a while, we talked about we were going to hold practices outside, and until the government or the CDC shuts us down, we're going to keep going. And we quickly realized that didn't really line up to our values, that we wanted to keep people safe and do what was right. So we were kind of on the forefront, I think, of saying, hey, we're going to shut this down and we're going to make decisions that we feel are in the best interests of our players and parents, and what we think is socially responsible. Which in turn, Jeremy, like you said, it gave us really positive feedback from our people. And once we were really vulnerable with them and telling them, like, hey, we're going to shut this down, but we want to keep everybody together, and we realize that this is a hard time for everybody. But if you're willing to do anything you can from a financial standpoint to sort of keep your membership payments going, otherwise we'll turn them off and turn them back on when we're ready to go. And we've gotten a really tremendous response from the people, that because they do care about us, and I think they care about all the organizations on this call, is that they want their kids to do things, and they realize the people that are out there trying to do good, trying to have a positive impact on kids and bring communities together, and they want to work to keep those going. And we've seen just a tremendous response from all of our families and all of our players, and they want to help us. And we've in our own way, we've asked for their help, while also being really proactive and what can we give them of value? How can we maintain as many touch points with our both, like I said, staff, coaches, parents, and players? And we've been really active on social media. The Zoom workouts have become popular. We're putting together online workouts and special, recruiting things, homework assignments that kids can do. So we're trying to build essentially a new business model, as we write it and put things out and communicate internally as best we can. But I think, like a lot of people, we're kind of scrambling to make the right decisions and really falling back on our values.
Logan, thanks for sharing that. And one thing that strikes me is you're not waiting for things to happen, right? It's not a strategy to hope in that people are going to pay their monthly payments, or they're not going to cancel or not dispute. By being proactive, right, by taking that action, you've actually been able to take that destiny in your own hands. And by being vulnerable, there's a great book called The Culture Code. I'm not sure if Michael or Shane have read that, but it's one of the key attributes of leadership is vulnerability that the book talks about, right? And the ability to be vulnerable is one of the things that builds that authentic connection to your audiences. So appreciate your sharing that, and I encourage everyone to check out what Pro Skills is doing on Instagram, because they've got an amazing Instagram game, which is as good as your game on the court, Logan. And what I'll probably do is circle back to you at the end of this, unless there's some specific questions directed to you about what's the takeaway you're going to take from Michael and Shane today that might be kind of representing the youth sports community. DJ, I'll bring you into the conversation. What's interesting is you don't only have one organization that's impacted. You got three organizations that's impacted, because you're not only running Ultimate Lacrosse, you're running an events business, and you're leading the Women's Professional Lacrosse League, the WPLL. So you're contending with a lot. So how have you approached this particular situation, especially when you think about different situations with different organizations? What's the advice that you have about leadership and communication and the way that you've navigated this crisis for your organization?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks again for having me on here, you guys. Great information that you've given. As soon as all of this started happening, all the shutdowns started coming out, the Olympics announcements, all the things that were like, oh my gosh, this is really, really serious. My mind went right away to, okay, how can we be better from this? How can we continue to help and engage with our athletes? I've got 500 kids that I need to make sure from all ages that are still staying engaged and that want to continue to develop and learn. And how can I help them? How can I help their parents become more educated, not only about our sport in general, but like for some of the age groups, recruiting and continuing to stay involved with them through Zoom calls, and thinking about my coaches, how can I continue to develop them all from afar, right? So we've decided to have weekly, maybe 2 times a week with my coaching staff on Zoom calls to talk about new ideas, get innovative, get them to be more creative in what can we put out there for our kids, workouts, skill work, whether it's offensive, defensive, stick work, doesn't matter. And then fitness, just making sure that we're creating new content for our kids weekly that gives them a schedule Monday through Friday so that our kids can follow something and then be held accountable for it. I think it's easy for you to say, go out and do this or do that. And, they'll say, I'll get to it later. But now they've got something in their hands that they can keep track of and share back with us. We're holding Zoom calls with certain classes that are, especially like our 21s that are being recruited right now, committing. And I'm going to be there. I want to be as available as I can so that they can ask any questions. Their parents can reach out to me. So accessibility is important. We're doing that for all of our classes, especially the youngest kids. It might not be about recruiting, but it's about how are you doing today? How are you managing each day? What are you reading? What are you watching? How can you stay engaged? I'm kind of like, I just want them to know that I care and that I'm there for them. I think there's so much that we can do from afar that I never thought I could do before. So like getting our kids more involved on Instagram and getting them to create, TikToks and competitions and just having them engage more with not only all the kids in our club, but also, our coaches and, setting up the little competitions between one another, I think is fun for them. And then it keeps them actively engaged. And then on my, you're obviously thinking the schedule ahead, like you have to be able to pivot. So when we get the go ahead, whether we lose May, what are we going to do in June? If we lose June, what are we going to do in July? And we have to be prepared for that. And so we're sending out schedules to our families so that they know heading into, say, July, okay, you're now going 4 days a week or whatever it may be that works for your club. And same thing goes for our event side. We might lose some events that are in June. Are we preparing to have them now in August? And hopefully we get them to happen. And if we don't, what do we do then? And then with my pro league, I get my leadership group together, which are 12 players, and we talk about the things that, what do we want to do this season? What do we want to see this season? What happens if? And then obviously keeping them engaged and having them be more involved on Instagram and Twitter so that they can, really engage our fans and keep them interested in what this league is doing, and for our women to really share some of their special stories. So we're trying to get everybody involved and, doing all that and trying to, all of us, well, Mike is a grandparent, but as we're managing our young ones, it's a challenge for sure.
Yeah, well, one thing is, DJ, it's awesome to hear you share that. And what I see is not someone who's paralyzed by this, but who's figuring out ways to get better. And as you mentioned, some of the things that you're doing now, they're going to be part of your toolkit, right? You're going to be better at scenario planning and forecasting. You're going to be better at the virtual tools, the way that you're engaging people on social media. And so I think that the ability to kind of adapt is I think really, really critical. And when this comes out of it, the organizations that are doing and using this time wisely, not making the days count, I think will be better for it. I'm going to go to now engage kind of Michael and Shane in questions. And if there's questions also for Logan and DJ, we'll pull them in. And I'm eager to put them on the spot at the end about other things that they've learned from today's conversation. Use that chat tool on the right-hand side. We've got a question in from Australia. We got Sopranos references. I don't even understand, Michael, that I'll throw to you as well. And the first question I'll pose to Shane and Michael is, there's that Herb Brooks quote. I've used it a few times over the past couple of weeks. Great moments are born from great opportunity, right? And so how do you think that great leaders, or what are personal experiences have you seen about where you find the opportunity in a crisis, right? And how do you find that opportunity? What's the experiences that you have or the advice you might have about how leaders see opportunities when there's a crisis and things, all the assumptions they had were being challenged? I'll throw it to Michael first.
Well, I think, I have a plaque on my desk by Einstein: in the middle of difficulty lies opportunity. I think if you have the curiosity to look at this situation as an opportunity, you shift your mindset, you shift your focus. Most people tend to just complain about it, right? They complain about all the things we don't have when there's a great opportunity. Nightline, ABC's nightly news program, was created through crisis, through the Iran-Contra hostages started day one. It was just titled day two, day three. And next thing you know, Ted Koppel, who was an unknown reporter, started hosting a TV show called Nightline. And it made his career. So there's 1,000 opportunities. You know, we know Sir Isaac Newton developed geometry and when he was quarantined, and there's been so many things that have happened. You know, Don Quixote was written by from a prison cell. So I think you have to it's all shifting your mindset. Like, what can I do now to better myself today, tomorrow, and better other people around me? I think there's opportunity out here. There's plenty of it. And I think we're going to change the landscape. Jeff Bezos has this great line, and I think we tend to focus too much on what's the world going to be like in 5 years. And Bezos keeps reminding us what's going to be consistent 5 years from now, what's not going to change, and focus on that. And I think people that look that way are going to benefit from this moment, and there's going to be huge benefits from this moment.
Yeah, that's powerful. Shane, what is your perspective on how you seek out opportunity, or where you see opportunities that might be in crisis or when you're experiencing adversity?
Well, one thing I know for sure is you don't all of a sudden become a great leader right now. And that may be the misconception of our media world, that all of a sudden leaders got to do something entirely different in moments of crisis that reveal their character. No, the great leaders throughout history are who they are consistently, but it's magnified in times of peril and crisis. And so it really comes down to, what are your core values? What are your standards? And are you living those consistently? Because what crisis does, it reveals opportunity to let those core values and those philosophies shine through. But if you haven't been living those honestly and from the heart, very, very difficult to summon those right now. And so you look at any great leader, they've walked the walk and talked the talk the entire time. But now that the microscope is a spotlight, it's the narrative shifts, but the formula has always stayed the same.
Yeah. And I think what you're saying is that this is an opportunity to reveal yourself, right? And while there is opportunities to develop yourself as a leader, the reality is that leadership isn't just born overnight, right? This is a chance to reveal. It does seem that at the heart of this is also how you respond to adverse situations, right? And there's questions that are coming in around adversity. Shane, from your perspective, what are the ways that you build that kind of resiliency? How was it that when you're down 5 with 28 seconds left in Game 6 of the finals against the Spurs, that you guys didn't freak out? What were the things that you did as a leader on that team, or that LeBron did, or that Riley or Spoelstra? How do you build that kind of resiliency so you're in a position to respond to those kinds of adverse circumstances?
Yeah, that's a great question. And people always ask me, were you nervous in Game 7 of the NBA Finals or any elimination game? And the answer is no, because that's what you train to do. And you gain tremendous strength through repetition, and mental repetition, physical repetition. And when you're going through drills, or when you're just doing something innocuously just to practice, you're gaining a rep, because you never know when that rep is going to make the difference in execution and failure. And so the great teams that I've played on, great coaches I've played on, I never talked about this is our moment to reveal ourselves. No, this was, we do what we need to do, but we need to be the best version of ourselves. All right, and that's the one thing, the one message that you could probably talk to your people about, your teams. Be who you are, but be the best version of who that is. And when you put it that way, it's you pay attention a little bit more, you prepare, and that is the extra edge between champions and also rams.
Jeremy, I think in playing off of what Shane said, I think the problem is the question. People, what do we do with this adversity? I think if you just study Navy SEALs, right? They bring 180 people into the Navy SEAL program. All of them can do push-ups, all of them can do the sit-ups, all of them can run the mile, all of them can pass every single test. That's why they got into BUD/S training. The problem is what separates the 180 that get in to the 30 that make it is volume, right? The volume of work, getting ahead of themselves. I think this is the ultimate time to be mindful. You know, we have a society that we want to do two things at one time. We call it multitasking, and science has proven that multitasking doesn't work, right? And people like Belichick and Coach K, they have an incredible ability to focus on the exact moment and live in that moment and work on that moment and not worry about what's next, not worry about the next drill, the next day, or what's coming. And I think that really is a powerful thing, especially today when we're going to be quarantined for another 28 days. We can't look at the number 28. All we have to do is look at the next 4 hours. We're going to be productive the next 4. And then when we wake up tomorrow, we're going to be productive the next morning. It's just stack, as Belichick says, stack days on top of one another. Volume is what kills us. The thought of volume, we can't think of it.
Michael, just to press on that a little bit so I can reconcile that. So it seems on one hand, and I've described this to our team. I think Jason Garrett tried to do this. He just didn't execute it very well, but I guess he probably picked it up with time with Coach K or Belichick, which was this idea of focusing. We want to win a championship. You don't talk about winning the championship. You talk about that next practice or that next game, right? And you know, Belichick almost mocked it about his press conferences there. But at the same time, he does have a game plan or a vision for what they need to do to win the season. So how do you compartmentalize this idea of being mindful, and then how at the same time you're being strategic because you're ultimately seeing the chessboard, seeing the non-obvious, seeing what's not going to change over 5 years. So as a leader, how do you compartmentalize those two things, right? Mindfulness, but also being strategic.
Well, I think you have to understand the difference between strategy and tactics, right? Strategy is doing something when there's nothing to do. Tactics is doing something when there's something to do. And you've got to put yourself in both places, right? And so you've got to understand when strategy is needed, we're not doing anything. We're thinking. When tactics are needed, when we put the plan in place, we've got to execute the plan. And I think, you know, one of my heroes in life is a man by the name of Robert Caro. He's written 5 books in his life. 4 of them on Lyndon Johnson, 1 of them on Robert Moses. And he writes a paragraph about what the book is about. He doesn't view himself as a biographer. He views himself as a study of power. And in each book that he's written, he starts with a paragraph, maybe 2, about what that book's going to be about. That's the strategy. The tactics is working every day on the book, 1,000 words, 2,000 words, whatever it is. But he reads the strategy every morning when he comes in. And I think that's how we have to approach our day. Where are we going, right? But today is the most important day we have. And we got to make the most of it. We have to be tactful today, and we'll remind ourselves of the strategy. Sometimes we confuse the two.
Yeah. You know, Shane, I think there's this vision of top-down leadership, but the reality is you were not the coach on these teams, although maybe on the court you certainly were. But with Coach K or with Riley or Spoelstra, you know, what is the way that organizations create leadership within their organization? Because if you're the only one that's being a leader, if Logan or DJ are the only one that's being a leader, that's different than how you cultivate leadership in other people. And I think that one of the contexts I would give for that question is, are the organizations that are listening to this, they're actually in the business of developing leaders, because kids are playing sports or adults are playing sports, and that's a leadership ability to develop leadership through that. So how do you develop or create that sense of pure leadership, whether it's on a sports team or in a business or organization?
Well, the last time I was the best player on a team was 20 years ago. And really from the first day of my day as a pro, I was not the best player. But I always looked at myself as, what do I need to do to help our group be successful? And every great group and company and team of note is made up of people who carry that mindset. And if you look at your own organization, I'm sure that unless you consciously think about the traits of these people, sometimes you don't acknowledge their contribution. But people who listen well, who ask great questions, who have a high EQ, who don't make excuses, who are honest. These are the bedrock of any great foot soldier, any troop on the ground, of any great team. And in times like this, these are the people that will do things sort of outside the umbrella of the leadership from top down that hold it together. And so as leaders of your organization, I would take half an hour out of your day and think about the people who were like me. But I was called the no stat all-star my stats were really really marginal, but every team I played on had great success. And those people that, especially during times like this, you know you can lean on to hold the company message, to hold for it, to keep morale high, to keep it going. And it's important all the time, but it's especially important right now.
And Michael, one thing that's interesting is, you know, the NFL draft's coming up, and I think you talk a lot about, you know, bias, I think, in the way that you might evaluate talent, and also even in the way that you look for things that are the intangibles, right? How do you find the people that are the Shane Battiers of the world? And as organizations that are in this situation, they're faced with a couple decisions. One, they may be in a position to have to let some of their staff or coaches go, and they have to make some choices. And so how they're figuring out that. The second thing is they're going to be in a position to have to hire people back. And given where the economy is, they may have a lot of different options or choices for that. So what advice do you have if what Shane's saying, a lot of that ability to create that peer leadership not only comes down to the values and as a leader, how do you cultivate it, but how you build the team around it? What's your advice on how you think about evaluating talent, looking at talent, that as you compose teams, and then also could translate to the way that they're building teams that are successful on and off the field?
Well, I mean, I think ultimately talent is about being, you know, talent equals mental toughness. You've got to be. Shane was an incredibly mentally tough guy. He's modest and doesn't want to say it. But what the definition of mental toughness is doing what's right for the team when it might not be right for you. You know, and I think that good teammates are mentally tough. Good teammates will do what's right for the team when it may not be right for you. And that's ultimately where we are right now. It's ultimately what's good for the company. It may not be good for you. You know, what's good for society, it might not be good for you. And you've got to be willing to do that. And teammates that stay the test of time are willing to do that. You know, when we evaluate talent in the NFL, it's really decision making. And what you try to do in the decision making process, like the draft, is eliminate bias. Bias is the cancer of the draft. And most of the time there's, you know, in life, when we walk through life, there's 28 forms of bias that we come across on a daily basis before we make a decision, you know, and the marketers know exactly how to pinpoint our biases, and they get us to buy something, you know. And so you have to be keenly aware of what your biases are. And in the draft, confirmation bias, you know, wanting someone to tell you what you already believe is true, that's one bias. Anchoring bias is when you stick on one thing that you think is true when it's probably not even relevant, you know. A memory bias, when you remember, you know, I compare this player to that player, well, there's really no comparison to that player, right? And here and now, where, you know, with the future bias, which we see all the time, no one cares about the future, they only care about the present. So as you involved in decision making, especially in crisis, you've got to look at all your biases. And then as a teammate, somebody who's in an organization, I want to be around people that care about the name on the back, more the name on the back, on the front, more than the name on the back. You know, I want somebody who wants to honor the tradition, wants to build a team. Talent alone is never.
Yeah, so when you talk about that team dynamic, you know, an interesting situation that Shane, from the perspective now with the Heat, and Michael, I think you've written about this as well, is you know, right now you've got these organizations that have all these players and all these coaches and staff that are set on the sidelines, right? And so what are the ways that they can improve them when they don't have them in the weight rooms or the gyms or right in front of them every day? And I think you described in one of your writings about the circle of influence and this notion of how you create higher level of accountability within the organization. Maybe you could speak about it a little bit, and so that there's strategies that organizations can use to improve the kids and families in their organizations, the adults in their organizations as well.
Right. So like today, like DJ and Logan, you know, they're running companies that have a vast amount of people. If you're Mike Krzyzewski, you don't have 15 players on your basketball team. You have 15 players, and then every one of the people in those 15 players' lives that influence them. That's your circle of influence. And you have to work on those. And that might be 150 people today. You know, one player might have 5 people that influence his life. Well, those 5 have to be part of your Zoom conferencing. Those 5 have to be part of your daily emails. Those 5 have to be part of your messaging, because those 5 are going to influence the player. Left alone, you're dealing with those 5 in an adversarial way. Well, you don't really have to work out today, or it's not that important. You know, nobody cares. But together, it's what Duckworth talks about in her book, Grit, the butterfly effect. It's when we can build these great, powerful people unifying together like we're trying to do to fight this disease. We can do it within teams. And you have to be able to communicate your message to them on a daily basis. And so today, as you sit in your office and you have 15 people that work for you, you need to write down their circle of influence and who you're communicating with. And you're talking to their wives, their kids, because they're part of your team now. Their team is that house. Your team of their dog. They're everybody. And if you miss,
I love
great point.
I love that point. One thing we did that became a tradition at LeagueApps was we'd have family night where we'd have everybody bring family members or roommates and other people. Because when you're working at a high growth company, people are making sacrifices. And your point, if you're coming home and they're egging you on or they're complaining or they're these things that are influenced. So the more that you recognize that you're in this together, it's important. And it's such a good point now when you think about that circle of influence. And the paradox in youth sports is parents are the customer, right? But they're also one of the biggest points of challenge. And so trying to think about strategies to engage them as part of that circle of influence, I think is a really important idea. And maybe this is a great opportunity to build that kind of relationship and dialogue. And Shane, I think that you hear something about the circles of influence around some of the players, right? And as you think about the Heat, who are off to a good start, that are sitting right there, how do you think about how they better themselves right now? What are the strategies that you might encourage or suggest, or how do you think about it? I know you're really committed to your own personal improvement to try to influence and better the team, even in an environment where things are paused.
Well, you don't get to the top level of any profession without being maniacal about your improvement, right? And there are really two different types of people and companies in the world. There's people who are knowing people and knowing corporations, and knowing people and learning corporations. And the people who think they know the answer, guess what? They don't improve. Because they think my methods, I'm biased towards, I know the answer to success, and they don't grow. People who are learners and people who will use this time to get better say, what can I learn? How can I get better? Is there work on Instagram I can find that, makes me, 0.5% better? Is there a new dribbling drill I can do? And the people who improve the most, and those are the people who long-term have the most success, find every opportunity, every to get better and gain a little piece of real estate. And so, luckily now that, there's no excuse for lack of resources. Thinking about this growing up as a kid, I would have given anything for YouTube to learn every basketball drill I could have found. But it's
I could have been a hell of a student with Google,
There you go. So I want to start, to reflect the seriousness of the moment. Some of the questions are coming in. One that's been asked in a couple different ways, and I'm going to pose it to Michael, given all the leaders that you've studied over time. And Shane, you want to weigh in, you can. Which is, there's the possibility that these organizations are going to be dealing with death, right, or serious illnesses with members of families or athletes or staff. How should they think about dealing with that? How do you approach dealing with something like that? And I don't know if you've been in circumstances, situations where you have that kind of serious loss or impact that's just beyond what an organization would normally contend with. Michael, a thought there?
Well, I think it goes back to what I said originally. You got to preserve the pride, right? I mean, you've got great players, great employees make your company, and you've got to honor those people, and you've got to make sure that the people that come before them understand that. When you go into the Patriots cafeteria, on the wall in the cafeteria of all the Patriot players who made the Pro Bowl, because Belichick wants to be able to ask the rookies, the young players, who those guys are on that wall. Who's Andre Tippett? Who's John Hanna? These kids don't have no idea who they were. They weren't even born when those guys played. But what he's trying to do is preserve the pride. He's trying to get the history behind it. Walsh used to say all the time, Marines fight for Marines. We fight for a reason. We fight for the pride. And I think you've got to honor these people who have given their life up. And really preserve that and make them part of the
fabric. Shane, it suggests a larger question, which I think has been coming in too, which is there are crises that are internal, like Carlos Boozer getting impact on the team. This is an externally made crisis. Does that change how you approach this? Does that change how you deal with this when you think about the kinds of things that are happening to people in your community that are totally outside of your control?
It's not as but when you step back and see how everyone's starting to get impacted, it becomes real. It becomes very personal, and it's on our doorstep, no question about it. And we all do our part. And every time that you can tell someone, you know what, do your part, stay at home, wash your hands, practice physical distancing. We're in the greatest game now, the game of humanity, and this is the ultimate team. So any sport metaphor you can use, coaches, use it, because this is a game right now.
Yeah. One thing I saw that was powerful. It was a synagogue in Dallas that there was someone who had died in the community. People couldn't go to the funerals right now, so instead there was a driving procession, and everyone just drove their car by the house and waved at the family. And that was the way that they created that sense of pride within the community and the constraints that within the organization that they have now. The last question I'll pose a question to Michele and Logan, then we'll wrap up with Michael and Shane. Michele and Logan, one of the questions I think people are asking is, one, how are you instilling confidence from a distance in your organization, right? In your team, in your staff, in your coaches, and in the people within your organization. What is the way that you're inspiring and instilling that confidence? If you have a quick response to that, and then I'm curious to be what your biggest takeaway from today's discussion would be. I'll go to DJ first.
Yeah, I mean, again, just staying connected and as best as I can face to face, I think is really important for our kids to see me and to see my coaching staff and to know that we're with them. We're here as a resource, and that anytime they want to pick up the phone or have a FaceTime, I'm here. And I think that's really important, especially kids our ages, to know that, they have somebody that they can go to that especially is in our industry and can help them continue to develop. And with coaches as well. I mean, that is one thing that, just from listening to you guys is just like, how am I getting better? I need to have calls with you guys. You mind if I give you, have some conversations with you? This is great for me. And so I reach out to other coaches to try to better myself so then I can pass it on to my coaching staff and always kind of, drill them with new drills that, might challenge them mentally and, how can they be better communicators to, their teams. And so it's constantly evolving. I'm not perfect at all, but I know that one thing Mike said is just like, how can we do better for everyone that is around us? And that's kind of always in the back of my mind. And then with Shane, what he said earlier is just like, when you're down in the dumps and you think it couldn't get any worse and you're faced with that adversity, you have to believe in that we're going to get through this. And as long as we're together, we can get through anything.
That's right. Thank you, DJ. I appreciate that. Logan, what's your perspective on how you've instilled that confidence and sense of community within your organization, and what's the biggest takeaway you took away from the conversation today?
Yeah, along the lines with what Michele said, just being, just in our communication, being as clear and open and transparent as we can. We make a lot of decisions as a group, and we're making a lot of decisions top down, asking for feedback. We want to ask for feedback and let people know what we're thinking. And we get ideas from everybody in our organization, top to bottom. So I think that's been really helpful, and just letting people know, like, hey, it's rapidly evolving. We're going to be really honest with you guys, but this is what we're thinking. What's the feedback? Can we pull this off? And what are our next steps? And then, also trying to keep it, every day we try to do a shout out. We try to do, like, what are some good things that are happening right now? We've seen a lot of, when it goes to healthcare workers, there's a lot of people out there right now really trying to take positive steps and help out. And we think it's important to highlight those things and let people know, like, hey, there's a bigger thing out there. I know our jobs are on the line and the business that we built is on the line, but there are people out there that are dying right now, that are losing jobs, that are struggling for food. So trying to maintain perspective and trying to do what we can to help those people, even in worse situations than we're in right now. So all those things, just the clarity of communication and going back and forth and maintaining it every day and asking for feedback and, making quick and strong decisions. I just think it's been a lot. I think Shane and Mike have given people in our positions everything. I've taken 2 pages of notes here, and I think when I sit back and look at it, it's like, how can somebody in my position or another club position do all of these things? But to me, it kind of falls back on what are the values that we've been instilled in the company, and what do we think is most important right now, and making decisions based on making quick decisions, strong decisions based on your values, I think is what's going to guide us through. But I could sit for days and listen to stories from Mike and listen to Shane about Coach K and what he's done. And those guys are inspirations, and I think people should seek those out, and also seeking out ways that they can lead and they can help others.
Great. Michael and Shane, I'll pose the last questions to you. Shane, if you, a lot of this comes back to, there's a lot of innate traits of a leader that again, this is an opportunity to reveal yourself. But as you said, you can never stop committed to being better. What's one piece of advice you have or something you do as a practice for how you improve? And maybe you could share that piece of advice to the group or practice.
The biggest practice, the best practice that I've continued, that I've started in the last few years, that I've felt has been the most helpful, has been this daily mindful meditation and being grateful and being grateful. And Jeremy and I, we talk about the common thread amongst leaders is a morning routine and the practice of gratitude. And every morning I wake up and I get my meditation in, and I write in my gratitude journal, and it really gives me the right perspective on what I need to focus on today. Well, like Michael said, what do I need to do today to help my family, to help my team, to help the community? And I've been on that hour by myself in solitude, but it's really been a game changer in times of need and crisis right now.
I love that, and it's that morning power hour, which I think our team has embraced. A lot of people were inspired by that. One thing I'll plug is in 2 weeks, I think our entire theme of that week is going to be focusing on mental resiliency, mental performance, mindfulness. I think we're going to offer to this whole community a free meditation training. So if you're interested in that, stay tuned. Michael, it's been interesting to hear Logan and DJ talk, because the idea of pride in their organization comes through. You've been around Belichick, who I assume is committed to constantly getting better. You yourself feel like you're committed as well. What's the advice you have? What's the practice you have for constant improvement as a leader that you'd recommend?
Well, I think the greatest virtue we ever get in life is curiosity. You can't stop learning. I mean, Coach Raveling, who's part of the Daily Coach, we started it together, and he's been the one who's inspired great curiosity to me. You've got to really try to learn something every single day, something different. Challenge yourself to learn. I think what Shane said about writing something down every day, being mindful of where you are, and then the other thing is we have to give to people. I think it's really important when you give what you know to other people, it makes you grow as a person, and it shows you something else about yourself. So I think those are the things that have been the most helpful. This is probably the best time of my life. Get the Super Bowls, being able to give out information to help people just a little bit, to get a little bit better.
And Michael, there's one last question where people wanted to know, is there a Soprano analogy or Goodfellow analogy that describes this current moment and how people should respond? So do you have a 30-second snippet that you want to direct people to?
Well, I think that I think the one thing that you can learn from those shows as much as anything is resiliency, right? Like, you can't focus on the present. I think anybody who's worried about tomorrow is wrong. We got to get through today, right? And we've got to be able to behave in the moment and really tighten down and bond together. And they talk about family in The Sopranos. Well, I think we all have to be a family.
Yeah, I appreciate those words. And again, as I started with that Muhammad Ali quote, don't count the days, make the days count, right? What are you going to do today? This has been an incredible gift to have this conversation. And I think what I love about DJ and Logan is they furiously taking notes and participating, is they represent, this incredible kind of emerging youth sports and local sports industry that are seeking to be better professionals and committed to learning. And we're certainly eager to match that with all kinds of content. If you're interested in accessing some of Michael's content, you can feel free to check out the LeagueApps blog at LeagueApps.com. There's an article I wrote about Michael and a conversation I had with him this week where he has links to all of the different content. I highly recommend his podcast and as well as his daily newsletter, The Daily Coach. And Shane Battier has got an incredible foundation. He needs no introduction, and he's been an incredible investor, supporter, and partner for LeagueApps. So appreciate you all as well. And we're going to continue to provide lots of content. So we've got a digital innovation focus. Next week, we've got all kinds of new resources where we're collecting the top TED Talks on leadership that will start to roll out, meditation training, you name it. And we want to hear your ideas. So fill out that survey. Jamie and our team will post that again in that chat and send that out in the email link. And we'll give $100 away to someone who's filling that out. Because if you help us understand where you want to get better, we will leverage the resources like Michael and Shane and other voices to help you get there. So I want to thank this incredible panel, Logan and DJ, for your heroic work in leading your communities at a really difficult time, and the work you do for sports and bringing people together. And again, Shane and Michael, for sharing your expertise that will impact so many people with the information you shared today. This is Jeremy Goldberg signing off, and we'll see what my hair looks like next week. Have a great day, great afternoon, stay safe, and make the day count, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.